Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brenton back with the Autumn Transport Podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. It's been a while since I made one of these videos. September got a little bit crazy for me. I ended up doing a little bit of traveling for work, did a little bit of travel for pleasure. Took my son out to Wyoming on a hunting trip and had a great time with that. But now it's back to get rolling with the podcast. And so I want to give a shout out tonight to KAW Services, KAW Services in Kansas City, Missouri. It's a tank wash and a truck and trailer maintenance facility. Really great people down there. They'll take good care of you. Angela, their owner, is an awesome lady, and they got a heart for drivers. So if you're ever in the Kansas City area and you need anything done on your truck or your trailer, getting some maintenance done, getting a washout done, check out the people at KAW Services. They'll hook you up. Tell them Brenton from the Autumn Podcast sent you, and maybe that'll get you moved right to the front of the line. But tonight, got a couple people with me. Chris Senty and Bill Drath are our safety coordinator and safety director at Autumn Transport. So I'm going to welcome these guys to the stage. How you guys doing?
Doing good. How are you guys?
Doing good. Beautiful day today. Can't beat 85 in October.
Yeah, October 21st in Minnesota, it's 85 degrees. It's weird. You go outside and the leaves are all changed colors. It looks like it's supposed to be cold, and you just start sweating right away. So a little different than we're normally used to. So tonight, I wanted to bring you guys on here to talk about hours of service. Titled this podcast, TikTok Know Your Clock. Big deal for truck drivers, independent contractors, owner operators, wherever you find yourself in the trucking business, you're going to be dealing with federal regulations regarding hours of service. And so I want to bring you guys on here to talk a little bit to the ICs that we got partnering with us at Autumn, and to any of those other truckers that are out there that are following this podcast and maybe have some questions about what hours of service is, how they work. And looks like we scared Chris off, Bill.
Wow. That didn't take much.
No, but it puts us in real trouble because he's the expert here.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
I don't know what happened. I was like, where'd it go?
I got real nervous because if I was supposed to fill the time and answer our drivers' questions, we'd be in trouble. Bill, I'm sure you'd have my back. But,
I think I do pretty good.
There you go. All right. Well, it's hard to trust the guy with that much Packer gear in the back of his screen there.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, man. So, Chris, why don't you, Chris, get us started talking about hours of service.
So hours of service, all drivers are out there for production. They want to be able to drive as much as they can every day. To get on to that next load or to get home, whatever it might be. But as they know, every minute of their day is controlled by the hours of service. And if we get too many violations in hours of service, then drivers will tend to get pulled in at scales more. CSA scores will rise, things like that. So hours of service is very important. One, to understand it. Two, to comply with it. And three is to know how much you can get done each day and to know what status you need to be in at certain times during the day based on what you're doing at that moment during the day.
Sure. Hey, Dan, good to see you. Dan's here with us tonight. Man, I love that truck, Dan. I know it's giving you nightmares, but I think that's one of the most beautiful trucks any of our ICs got. I'm a long-nosed Pete guy, though, so I'm guilty. Roy Wallace, funny guy. First, he said Chris always disappears when you need him. Then he came back. He's always there when I need him. So thanks for tuning in, Roy. And I know your truck's been giving you fits, too. So I hope everything's going better for you or will be going better for you soon. Chris, when did this whole hours of service business get started? Because when my dad started trucking and growing up and watching him truck, I felt like all he ever did was just drive. He never slept. You know, there's songs about popping little white pills and logbooks behind and all that kind of stuff. When did the whole hours of service stuff really get going?
Well, you got me on that. I don't remember what year it was instated. I want to say it was back when the FMCSA was probably founded. There were points early on where even when there was logbooks, that's the way we drove. Really didn't matter. The hours of service have had a lot of changes over the years. But unfortunately, you got me on that one. I don't know the exact year when it came in. But okay. I would probably say it came in with the FMCSA or a little later or earlier with the ICC.
And what was the intent with that? Was it a group of government regulators sitting around just wanting to make life miserable for truck drivers?
Well, some days that's what it really feels like, especially if you've been out for 3-4 weeks and you're trying to get home. Sure does feel like it. But no, it was intended for safety of not only the motoring public, but also for drivers. There's been studies over the years with circadian rhythm, you know, with when drivers are sleeping, when they're not, you know, what effects that has on the body after working so many hours. But it was meant as a safety tool. Okay. As much as our drivers think of me. So I'm a tool.
Well, I looked it up quick, Chris. 1938 was when the Interstate Commerce Commission first put hours of service regulations in.
Did you say 1938?
1938. Yep. 1963, it was they could changed it to split their 8 hours of off-duty time into 2 periods of 4 hours each. But 1995 was when the Federal Highway Administration was established and started to do new regulations. So 95 probably is the current, most current ones.
Yeah, and in 2003, I think it was in 2003 is when they moved from you could be on duty for 15 hours, you could drive for 11, and you had to have 8 hours off between shifts, and that moved to what it is currently for property carrying vehicles. But motor coach and people transportation still go under the old hours of service for property carrying. They're still the 15 hours on duty, 8 hours off in between.
Yeah.
So, Chris, why don't you give us kind of at a base level, where are we at with hours of service now? I know we hear numbers like 70 hours, 14 hours, 8 hours, 7-3 split, all that. What kind of give us the kindergarten understanding of what are hours of service? Where are they at now?
So being as most everyone here is property carrying, I'll just focus on that. A driver can either operate under the 60 hours and 7 days or the 70 hour and 8 day provision. If your company operates 7 days a week, you can operate under 70 hours and 8 days. If it operates 5 or 6 days a week, it can operate under the 60 hours and 7 days. And a driver is allowed to be on duty for 14 hours in a day and drive 11 of those 14 hours. And within 8 hours of driving, they're required to take a 30-minute break. That 30-minute break can either be on duty, off duty, or sleeper berth, or a combination thereof to equal 30 minutes. And then a driver also has the option to do a split sleeper berth with either doing an 8 and 2 or a 7 and 3. If they choose to do a split sleeper berth, the smaller 2 or 3 hour portion can be either off duty or sleeper berth, but the larger portion is required to be in sleeper berth. And drivers have to be careful of that because when they're doing the 8 hour or 7 hour part of the sleeper berth, PC is not allowed during that time. It will negate that split sleeper berth.
Because how could you be driving under PC if you're supposed to be laying down back in your sleeper?
Yep. that they want it uninterrupted. And how the FMCSA looks at it is, if you're doing split sleeper berth, there really shouldn't be a time that you would need PC. You would always be running with hours.
I want to encourage you guys as we move along here. For those of you tuned in, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt us at any time. If you have a question about what is sleeper berth, what is PC, anything that we're talking about here, go ahead, drop a question in the comments and we'll read it and answer it. Bill, I know one of the things that you do at Autumn is look at a lot of logs. What are some of the things that you're seeing in terms of how guys are maybe not interpreting their hours of service correctly when they're filling out their logs?
Well, first thing is a 10-hour break is 10 hours, not 9 hours and 58 minutes. And if you start driving before you hit that 10, that negates that. So then a split sleeper berth might have to work for you, or you've got to start all over. The other thing is the 30-minute rest break. So in your first 8 hours of driving time, you must take at least a 30-minute break. And that 30 minutes has to be 30 minutes. And the ELDs, electronic logging devices, measure it down to the second. So make sure you're taking that exact time. Spend a lot of my time looking at reports for PC usage. And then we have to look at where you went and how it was used and things like that to make sure it follows the rules. And I was at a safety conference last week, and basically that is the hottest topic out there is PC use.
Let's come back to that, Bill. Sorry to cut you off, but we do have a couple of questions coming in. So I want to grab those and then we'll go back to PC because I know that is a big thing. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. First of all, Todd, how you doing? Good to see you, Mr. Moody.
Hey, Todd.
Dan Decker asked the question, how do you know what hours you're going to get when doing the split? What are the determining factors that give back the hours?
So the biggest way to look at the split is that you get the exact same amount of hours, the 11 and 14. And whenever you take a qualifying sleeper berth period, meaning the 2 off duty or the 8 off duty, on either side of that cannot equal more than 11 or 14. If you're in the split sleeper berth or the sleeper berth status, meaning that hours of service rule set, you can go into the recap on the side and it will tell you what your anticipated hours and what time you will receive those anticipated hours. But if you just want to look at your graph for a rough idea, count your hours before and after that last split sleeper, and that'll give you how many hours you would have available when you're finished with that period, that current sleeper berth period. So I suck at math, so I always make it really easy. Say you came on duty, you drove for 5 hours, and say we're operating with 10 hours of drive time. You took 3 hours off. You would then have another 5 hours to drive after that 3 hours off. And then when you took your 8-hour break, then you would have that other 5 hours back. You'd basically just keep rotating that same 5 hours. And then to find out the total time is if you had any on-duty time in there, that would be what you would subtract from your 14. So say you had a 15-minute pre-trip, you had a half-hour fuel and inspection in there, you would add that time together to say, okay, I had 5 hours of drive time, but I had 7 hours of on-duty time. So then you would have, under the 14-hour, you would have 7 hours of on-duty and 5 hours of drive time. And that's just because I suck at math. That's why those numbers are used.
Dan, if that helps, that's great. I hope it does. If you have a follow-up question, please go ahead and drop it in the comments for us here. We have another question here from Chris Horner. Chris, first of all, thanks for watching. Have you heard after you do a 8-2 or 7-3 split, after that you have to go into sleeper even if you're home? Some, as myself, have just gone off duty.
So
Okay.
that question comes from a lot of my customers that are owner ops, because it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Technically, you're not in compliance, but you are, because you did a legal sleeper berth. But when you get home, what's the thing? You always go to off duty. But when you do that, you create a violation, because now it's missing that 7 or 8 hour sleeper berth. So I just instruct drivers, when you get home, go into sleeper berth and either edit it when you come back out, or if truck's at home after 10 hours, go out and put yourself in off duty. But otherwise, if you leave it in off duty, as soon as you get home, it's going to show a violation, even though technically you're not, because you did your proper split sleeper while you're on the road. Now you're at home. But unfortunately, it's one of those that puts you in kind of a, well, what do I do now type situations. So that's how I generally direct our drivers, is to go into sleeper berth, and you can switch it later on, or when you come back out, you can edit it accordingly.
Chris, if you really want to make sure you don't get in trouble, just when you get home, just go actually sit in your sleeper for the remaining time and send Chris Senty a picture that you're laying in your sleeper, and then everything will be just fine.
Oh, I'd love some of those pictures I get. I can imagine the facial expressions. You're right, Chris. It is a catch-22. And that's why just the way you keep from getting noticed more is on these violations. So if you put it in sleeper berth and edit it out after, your 8 or 10 hours, never had a real problem with that before.
Well, thanks, guys, for asking those questions. Bill, want to swing back over to you here and tell us more about what you were at a safety conference. What conference was it? And what were you learning about PC?
It was Captive Connections. It was sponsored by the insurance agency, and it provides the insurance to all autumn owner operators, and that are pretty much all, as far as I know. And they have this conference twice a year to help keep people educated and up to date on any changes. As I was saying with PC, the biggest thing is personal. That's the first word in PC, and it's got to be personal. If you're doing it, anything is related to commerce. If you're going to a tank wash, or if you're going to a customer and you've run out of hours, you cannot use PC for that. We have a pretty good program at Autumn, and talking with other companies, people at the conference, some of them, they have their drivers have to call in every time they want to use PC. They have it turned off. And I can just imagine what kind of a pain that would be to have to do. But if it's used properly, then we can continue to use it the way it is. There are some rules and regulations being recommended. Hi, Jason. By CVSA, that FMCSA, all alphabet soup here, hasn't enacted yet, but limiting the amount of miles. Canada has done that, and I believe it's 41 kilometers is all it can be used on PC time, but they are looking at some changes to the PC rules, and they haven't been acted on yet. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Jason. Thanks for dropping in here, guys. What, Bill and Chris, as you guys are looking at logs, what are some of the big mistakes that guys are making when it comes to PC?
So we've actually had guys give themselves violations by the annotations that they make. One of the most common questions I get is, well, I can go to Walmart, can I? Absolutely. But don't ever put down going for supplies for the truck, because at that point, that's a business purpose, and you just gave yourself a violation.
Supplies for the truck, meaning like oil, or supplies like I need to get food to have in the truck?
No, like oil, antifreeze, window cleaner, whatever it might be, grease. You put supplies for truck, roadside inspectors, and you go, oh, well, what'd you buy? Well, I bought some groceries. I got some milk. I got some antifreeze. Well, the antifreeze just hosed you over there because now it's a business purpose. So my recommendation is if you're going to Walmart, it's for food, groceries, whatever. If you're going to buy supplies for a truck, do it at a different time or at a different place, just so that you're not getting a violation for the PC for a business purpose.
Chris, let me ask you, because what my mind is thinking is I would go to Walmart, I would get food from my truck, and then I'm already there. Makes the most sense to buy that antifreeze. Do I just buy it on a separate receipt and throw that receipt away?
I can't say that, but that's a something you should really think about.
Okay. What do the officers have? If I annotate that I went to Walmart on PC, do they have like the right to ask to see receipts?
So they have the right to ask for supporting documents. What you're willing to give at roadside, you might say, well, I don't have a receipt. And, the onus is on them then to go, okay, well, how are you going to prove what you were doing? Well, don't really know how to prove it, but that would be one that you could, if they give you a violation, you could data queue. But they have the right to ask for supporting documents, fuel receipts. If you say you spent the night at a hotel, they can ask for a hotel receipt or something. They can ask for supporting documents.
So it is a good idea to keep some of that stuff when it's, you legitimately are taking your truck to Wendy's or something to get dinner. It's not a bad idea to keep that receipt.
Yeah. Or at least keep the dirty wrappers for a little while, in the garbage can, not on the dash.
Not on the dash, no low-hanging fruit.
Yep. Keep the dashes clean. Be reasonable about it. Roadside officers usually don't get too far into supporting documents. Generally, where they get into supporting documents pretty deep is in an audit. When some drivers may not be familiar with the term supporting document. What that is anything that tells who, what, when, and where. So a fuel receipt shows that you were in Tomah, Wisconsin at 10 p.m. and you put on number 2 fuel. So supporting document shows that you were putting on fuel. You were in Tomah, Wisconsin, and here's the timestamp on the receipt. And generally, we give about 15 to 20 minutes either side because register receipts and credit card receipts aren't always printed immediately. So generally, you got a little bit of leeway. But if you're saying you're fueled at 10 p.m. and the receipt shows midnight or 4 hours before, they're going to call that as a falsified log because it's that far apart. One of the other more common things with the PC is drivers stopping on the roadside, unfortunately, and switching to PC because they run out of hours. So they think they can go to PC and go find parking at that point. That is considered a falsification of logs. What you're expected to do is take the violation and then annotate why that violation occurred. So let's say you got delayed in traffic or you had a breakdown or something where you didn't have a choice, but it doesn't meet an adverse condition or it doesn't meet anything else. You're going to put down why that violation occurred so that at least you're explaining what happened.
Okay. This is a good question here from Dan. If I run out of time at a consignee, how far can I travel? What status do I use? And what is considered a safe haven and what isn't? Anywhere, Dan, I'll answer that for you. Anywhere in Chicago is not a safe haven at all. So don't go to Chicago. But what is the official answer to that, guys? If a driver runs out of time, they made their delivery, their 14 hours is up, what do? They're told they can't stay there. The consignee says, nope, you need to leave. Then what do they do?
Do you want it, Bill, or you want me to do it?
You go into PC with the notation, wasn't allowed to park there, and they can go to the nearest safe haven for parking. Now, the nearest safe haven doesn't mean they can drive past 3 or 4 truck stops to get the one that they like better. And the other thing is, if your load is headed, or your next pickup, whichever it is headed west, and the next truck stop that way is 20 miles away, but you've got a truck stop 5 miles to the east, you're going east, even though you don't want to. You have to go to the nearest one.
Okay.
And what's considered...
Dan, I hear you, man. The Northeast is horrible for parking.
Oh, you aren't kidding. Anything east of the Mississippi sucks. For a safe haven, what they consider is your next safe, legal, available parking space. When they say that, when we talk about safe, I always joke around where if you're heading to somewhere safe, I don't consider the TA in West Memphis to be a safe parking place. If you want to bypass that and keep going, I usually don't fight it. Thank you, Jason. That was going to be one of my other points. He got me out a little early. So safe haven is actually not an hours of service term. It is for hazmat only. That is where you can drop a loaded hazmat trailer, and it's gated, guarded, and somebody has the ability to move it in an emergency. And what I learned is any military base is considered a safe haven because guess what? They'll put it inside, they're gated and guarded, and they'll move it whenever they want. So any military base is a safe haven, but it's a safe, legal, available parking space. I do not consider that to be side of roadways, on and off ramps, anything like that. We've unfortunately had 2 crashes due to someone pulling off on the side of the road and pulling back in. So we ask at any point, please don't pull over on the side of the interstate or side of a road. Get off at an exit and try to find parking there. The big catch, just like what Bill said, is don't be driving by places. So if you go to your first place on PC and you get there, there's no parking available. Those dash cams you guys have is great to hit that manual record button and drive around, because then you have video proof that there's no parking. The officer can't argue with that, and neither can I. Hey, look, yeah, there's no parking here. And then what you're going to do is make an annotation while you're there that no parking available, and you're going to go on to your next. And you do that until you find parking. There isn't a maximum time or mileage, but we do look at trying to be reasonable. We had a driver, I don't know, it's probably 2 years ago. He stopped at 4 places, and all 4 places did not have parking. So it was close to 2 hours before he found a place. So it's a matter of what's available, where you are, what is safe, and but what you can find, and just being reasonable about it.
Gotcha. Jason here says, to answer Chris's question, no, like he said, you take the hit and notate parking. This is what Chris asked here. Not to keep interrupting, are you allowed to use personal conveyance because you're held in rush hour traffic? Isn't that just poor trip planning?
Or being really unlucky.
Yeah, trip planning, adverse conditions would not allow that to be used then because of rush hour traffic, because that's a normal situation that happens every day. Now, if there is an accident that closes the road and you end up having to wait because of that, that's different. And that would fall under adverse conditions, in which you can use and take up to 2 hours of your time back from when you were sitting. But you only get the amount of time back that you were sitting there waiting to get through.
Okay, so let me speak this back to you, Bill. Make sure I'm understanding this correctly. 'Cause I remember we had a driver, one of our independent contractors a couple months ago was in Alabama, and there was a massive car fire, and it shut the interstate down I think he was just sitting there for like 6 hours. So if his clock ran out, he could extend that clock. Are you saying up to 2 hours and notate it as adverse driving conditions?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
But
And,
only up to 2 hours.
Just had that on down in Alabama on I-65 last week, where there was a police incident going on and they shut down the interstate. One of the drivers had called about that. And
Okay. But it doesn't matter how long you sit there. If you're sitting there for 5 hours or 8 hours, the most you can add to your time is 2 hours.
That's correct.
Yeah. We not often we run into it, but we did have one driver where it wasn't at a complete stop. It wasn't parked. It was like 1 mile an hour, 2 mile an hour forever, it seemed like. So in that case, he had to keep driving because it was continuous movement, but he ended up being a total of 4 hours. So 2 hours in adverse, but he went over an additional 2 hours. So we told him to continue in the violation and make the annotation of where it started and where it ended, because then we were able to verify the same thing on our end with the GPS trail. So then we have that information. So if we are in an audit or a roadside, we can say, yes, we use the exemption, but this still maintained before this driver was able to get to somewhere safe to park.
Either one of you want to answer this from Jason? Not supposed to exceed 16 hours total, correct?
So in the adverse driving condition, you are correct. In that situation, it shows as a violation because of it. But if that's what it took to get him somewhere, we're not going to hold it against the driver. Whether the FMCSA does is a whole different story, but.
Chris, you mentioned something earlier, and thanks to all you guys that are logged in here listening and asking questions. Appreciate it. And like Chris might have said, but if you got a question, somebody else probably has that same question. So don't be afraid to drop a comment, ask a question. We were here to answer your questions. No, I just forgot mine.
Brendan, one other thing I want to say on the PC, and it was brought up last week a lot, was the use of PC because it's in off-duty time. Don't want to make sure that someone's not taking a 3-hour break and then going on a 3-hour PC and then taking an hour break and going back driving. Well, they got their 7 hours, but no, they really didn't. So we want to make sure that people get their rest, and that's one of the biggest things is we don't want fatigued drivers out there. We want them to get their rest.
Right. Hey, Missy, hope you're doing good. Thanks for dropping in here. Where do you make the annotation in the ELD, or how do you get to the screen to annotate something?
So are you asking when you're entering one of these statuses like adverse or PC, or are you just talking a general annotation? If it's adding an annotation for one of these special driving, when you hit adverse or PC, the box that automatically pops up is going to be, it'll say reason. And that's what we mean with annotations. I think it says reason or annotation. That's where you're going to make the annotation of what you're doing it for. If you just want to annotate a status, like you ended up in a 15-minute over your 11-hour drive time and you want to annotate it, when you go to your events tab, then you'll see the events. You can tap on it, and then there should be a tab down below that says annotate. Or if you're using the web application, you can click the plus sign next to it, and that'll bring up an annotation box, and you can enter it in there. Or if you can't remember either one of those, give us a call in safety and we can add it.
Is an acceptable annotation after a violation for going over your hours of service to say, my dispatcher just overplanned me? Is that acceptable?
Unfortunately, no, because the DOT says the driver is the ultimate captain of the ship and has that decision. But what you hit on, there's carriers out there where that would be 100% accurate, unfortunately. They're getting fewer and far between, but unfortunately, there's still some out there.
But it really is important, that relationship that the independent contractors have with their dispatch team, as you're talking about your load plans, as you're looking at your ELD and figuring out, what time am I supposed to deliver tomorrow, or what time am I supposed to pick up, that you as the owner operators are understanding your own logs, understanding your hours, and having that conversation with your dispatcher to say, hey, I don't think I'm going to have enough hours to do this legally. Can we make adjustment on that pickup time? I want to say from my perspective, sitting in the load planning seat, that when you're load planning for, there's 40 drivers in liquid tanks. I think we're around 25 in hoppers and somewhere around 70 in our pneumatic division. It's real hard to know exactly where every single one of those drivers is at with their hours of service. Yeah. Okay. All right, Roy, I'm blaming Brenton for all my violations. Well, you're not even my division, buddy. But, it is really hard to know, okay, how many hours does Roy have left today? How many hours has Missy driven? Where is Jason at on his 70? And yeah, we have access to that data, and we can look up your logs and see. But having that conversation back and forth with your dispatcher, it saves you the headache. It saves us a lot of time. And I think in the long run, we're all more effective. So I just want to encourage anybody here listening that if you're given a dispatch, if you're given a plan and it's not realistic, if there's things that your dispatcher needs to know, okay, Dan Decker's blaming me for all his violations as well.
I think
Bill,
we have a theme here.
Yeah. If you guys start seeing that on the logs when you're auditing, just let me know. But yeah, have that conversation, right? And if you have questions about your logs, just like we are here now, Chris and Bill and the rest of the safety department at Autumn, they're there to help. We don't want you to have violations for your own sake, and we don't want you to have violations for Autumn's sake as a whole. So please reach out, send an email, make a phone call, and we're all here happy to help.
A couple other little quick things too, if I can add. Yeah.
Oh, here's a question too, Bill. Go ahead with your quick thing, and then we'll take Chris's question.
Is make sure on your notations they're clear. Don't put personal down, because I don't know what personal is. Going to truck stop for bathroom. I mean, that's fine. Not it's not like it's going posted on public. You can say what you want on there, but try and keep your notations clear. And there was something else too, but I just did that like Brenton did before. I forgot what I was going to say.
Do you want him to notate going to the bathroom if it's a number 1 or a number 2, or just
no?
Okay. Chris, are we allowed to turn off the logs through in the bunk and throw it in the bunk and worry about it later?
I never recommend throwing it in the bunk. Usually under the tires is better.
Roy says, honestly, I'm very careful with my hours of service, and when I have questions, I call safety. They always steer me in the right direction. Well, thanks, Roy. It's good to hear that our safety team is doing a good job.
And Jimmy, sorry.
Yeah, Jimmy had said, I'm blaming all my violations on tank washes. Dan Decker agrees the tank washes are the main culprit for violations. How do you handle tank washes? Sometimes guys will get there and they'll end up being stuck sitting there for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time. It'll eat up their clock. Another question we get, can I PC to a tank wash? I got empty I'm just about out of hours. I know I need to wash out tonight, so I'll be ready to go tomorrow morning. Can I PC to the tank wash? Is that something guys can do?
No, that's not allowed. It's a business purpose.
But now once you get to the truck wash and drop your trailer, you can PC and go get something to eat or go shopping, and then PC back to the truck wash for the night or for whatever. But yeah, going straight from your customer to the wash, that's a business purpose. If you get into a situation like that, I agree, Jason. Give us a call if you're not familiar with split sleeper berth and you're going to hit 7 hours. We can walk you through how to do it once and then get you back on your 11 and 14. So that way, hopefully you're not burning every single minute that day and at least be able to get somewhat down the road.
What if a guy gets to the tank wash, they're going to take their 10 at the tank wash, but the tank wash doesn't have a yard dog and they need to actually back the trailer into the wash? How do you do that or handle that situation so that you don't interrupt your 10? Is there anything they can do there?
Call me.
Call you? Okay. We'll do that. What other questions do any of you guys got here tonight for Bill and Chris when it comes to hours of service?
The other thing I was going to say before, which I forgot, is 70 hours is a hard stop. Adverse conditions doesn't work to add to that. If it's 70, it's a hard stop. If you hit your 70.
While we're waiting for our next question, something too that comes up, if you see on your ELD that it says you have X amount of hours left and you know that that's not correct, go into the options and hit request logs, because it's famous for brain fart. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I got hours that are missing or something doesn't look right. And then you call safety and we go, well, it's not what it says on our side. Hit a request logs. So I know how many people love to call safety. So if you want to avoid a phone call, try that first to see if it updates your hours and then looks correct to you. If it doesn't at that point, then give us a holler.
Speaking of requesting logs, isn't that that's something that drivers should know how to do when it comes to an inspection? I've heard about inspectors asking to see drivers' logs, and it's pretty important that they know how to do that. Can either of you talk a little bit about that and how a driver can access their logs through the ELD?
Do you want that, Bill, or you want me to?
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so request logs, what I was just talking about, is different than the roadside inspection. When you're on the ELD, you'll see a button that says data transfer or log transfer or compliance or roadside inspection. Different ELD systems have it labeled different. You're going to hit that, and then the officer is going to give you an email or a code, and you would enter that email or code in where it asks you for that information, and then hit send, or I can't remember what all of them say, but it would, at that point, you would just hit the code, email or code, and then send it to the officer. And if you're
true
not,
that once you do that, the officer, that they can track you for days afterwards?
No. Once you send them that code, it only downloads the 7 days that they are allowed. They can keep that 7 days, but they cannot track you at all. That is why when you want to get out of the roadside inspection status, you have to enter your password again, because it just, see you later, Chris. You have to enter in your code because you're no longer in the ELD full system. They can only have access to that data for that 7 days from the date of inspection.
Dan had another question here. When can we properly use a yard move?
Yard moves can be used on customer property. If you go out to a street or a roadway, then you're not in a yard move, you're in driving status. But if you're moving around on customer property, that is proper use of a yard move.
All right. Jimmy says, my ELD trips itself from PC to normal driving. It automatically then starts counting against my drive time. How can I fix this?
Drive to a nearest PeopleNet facility, and I can't say that.
Can't say that.
We have, that is currently a known issue by them, and they are still working on it. So if it happens to you, you have two options and one request from safety. The first request is please let us know because we submit all of those to PeopleNet for their investigation. And then your two options are, one, to run a paper log for that day, fill it back in with that information showing that you had the 34-hour reset or the full 10-hour reset based on whichever one you were doing. And then you have to keep track of your 70 hours until your next 34-hour restart. Or you just wait for another 34 to finish, or 10. Actually, I have a third option. You can just run on recaps if it's a 34 that you are taking, if you have hours available. This is something we have really been raising Cain about. The other one is where it's brain farting and not getting mileage tracked on some occasions. It's missing some data. So we've really been hammering away at them. If you have these problems, please let us know right away, because the sooner we can get it to them for investigation, hopefully the sooner we can get an answer on it. Yes, thank you, Roy. If you do call Trimble, get a case number, because if you end up on paper logs due to an issue like that, you have to prove that you actually did something about it. So I know it's very painful talking to the people at Trimble and PeopleNet. I know I do it often, and I want to cry afterward because I'm pretty sure I dropped 30 IQ points talking to them. But we have to let them know and give them as much information as we can. And then you get that case number to put on your log showing that we did take action.
Chris, one of the things that we encountered not too long ago was a driver whose ELD was not working at all, and he had to go on paper logs. And sounds like, have a good night, Jason. Thanks,
Jason.
Thanks for listening and sharing here. But let me put it this way. If a driver goes on paper logs, does he have to keep that paper log filled out, current and up to speed each day? Or at the end of, say, 6 or 7 days, can he go back and just fill them in from the best of his memory?
So what the regulation states is it must be updated to the current duty status. So if you get pulled into the scale, you're going to be on drive time. Well, if they pull you on back, now you're going to go to on duty. So it would be expected that you would be on duty status there. Not since 2 a.m, you've put on fuel, you've driven, you've unloaded, and then now you're going to sit there and try to update it at the scale. It's to the current duty status.
What sort of CSA points are associated with some of the things that we've been talking about tonight? Falsifying logs, misuse of PC, not having paper logs up to date if your ELD is not working. Are these things all weighted equally? Are some of them more damning than others?
Do you remember the point value, Bill, or do you want me to go through them?
I think you better do that. I think it's 7 is most of them, as I recall.
Yep, the majority of them are 7 for falsification for over your 11, over your 14. Missing trailer information is a point. Missing bill of ladings is a point. Improper use of a like PC, it would be a higher point, like the 7. So if you get a current inspection, like 0 to 6 months, one driving over your 11 hours, 7 points. So then you times it by 3 would be 21 points just for the single violation.
And you had said something to us on the dispatch team about somehow one violation can end up being like 3 violations all wrapped into one.
Yep. So those drivers that stop at the roadside and throw themselves into PC to go parking, they can actually give you 3 violations instead of just 1. So if you were just to take the violation and make the annotation, it's just going to be driving over your 11 or 14. If you stop, put yourself in PC, now you have driving over your 11 or 14, falsification of logs, and an improper use of PC. So you could have 3 separate violations. The 2, the falsification and over 11 or 14 for a new inspection would both be 21 points. And then whatever the improper use of PC would be. So they could get you 3 separate times on 1 violation. And that's why we've been trying to educate the drivers is don't pull over and put yourself into PC just because you're not going to get somewhere when you wanted to, because why do you need 2 extra violations when you only need 1?
Well, I appreciate everybody's questions here, and I appreciate your time, Chris and Bill. Give a couple more minutes here, I think, for other questions. If anybody has anything that they want to ask here before we wrap this up, go ahead, drop it in the comment.
One other quick thing I wanted to say is right now, being that we're in alert status for hours of service, it's falling on me to talk to people. So even if you have a 1-minute violation for hours of service, you're getting a phone call from me. And just to say, hey, you got to make sure not to run to that last minute, or, what happened. A lot of times I'll start with what happened. Why did it happen? Or, explain what happened. See if there's something, and I'll look at it, see if there's something we can change. If it qualifies for a split, and you went home and it's a weekend and I get in on Monday and I'm looking at things, can I just change it to sleeper berth and make it so it's legal then? Did that several times this week. So we want to make sure that we don't have the violations because of the increased inspection exposure that we have right now.
Anytime safety calls, it's not always a bad thing because sometimes we don't understand what's going on. So that's why we like to ask questions. So,
yeah, one of the things that I've always really appreciated about Autumn is the fact that we are all wanting to be on the same team together. There isn't thank you, Roy. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
But we want to support you as independent contractors, owner operators out there. We're not in the office. Bill's not running around with a big smile on his face, telling everybody how he caught some guy with a violation on his logs and now we're ordering pizza. We're there to support you guys and we want you to have success. We want to do things right. Integrity is one of our values at Autumn, and integrity comes back to the logbooks. Brian, thank you for all that you do.
Thanks.
And for being on here tonight. So if you guys do have questions moving forward here, please reach out. We have the email address here, safety@autumntransport.com. Chris and the rest of the team will be there to answer those emails and get you guys the information that you need.
Sorry to scare you, Roy.
Yeah. And, contrary to popular belief, sometimes we're not looking to fire anyone. We don't want that. What we want to do is educate and help the drivers understand what needs to be done so we can fix the problem.
Eric, thanks for checking in tonight. Tanner, thanks for checking in. Yeah, I would also like to just say if there's additional topics that you guys are interested in, things that you'd like to hear about, happy to set more of these things up to answer your questions. See you later, Dan. Have a great night. Drive safe, man. But yeah, I want to be a resource for you guys, and we don't have the opportunity to bring big groups of people into the office and have these sorts of trainings and discussions. This is a great way for us to get information out to you guys. Big Craig, thanks for checking in, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
You know, Craig, I love your attitude. Whenever I call you, you're always happy and smiling. Even when we've had some problems in the past, I just love your attitude.
Craig is the king of memes and Facebook comments too.
Yep.
All right. Well, Bill, Chris, I'll give you guys the opportunity if you have anything that you want to wrap up with.
I just want to say thank you to all the drivers. I have never been disappointed. Well, 99.99% of the drivers have never been disappointed in how they handle themselves and do just a great job for us. And when we bring stuff to them, they take it head on and do a great job. So I just want to say thank you. It's really appreciated.
Well, I just like to add in, I like talking to you guys, owner ops, and I'm learning. I think I'm doing pretty good on the learning side of it, but I learned many years ago to never say I've seen everything, because that's not the case that happens. So good night from the Crow.
Hey, Mike, that's okay if you missed the first half. This is going to be living on the internet, so this will be on YouTube. If you guys can go back. Oh, hey, hey, Shar, how you doing? This will be on YouTube, so you can go back, Mike, and you can check out the first half. Please feel free, share this with your friends. That's okay, Paul. You're driving. I know you're going to Chicago here, so be careful. It's not a safe haven, like we said. Share this with your friends, other drivers that are out there. This is meant to educate Autumn Transport family and anybody else that's interested in trucking and potentially being part of the Autumn family. So we hope this is a valuable resource for you guys. Like to do more of these. Send us an email with topics that you're interested in, and drive safe, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.